Stories are never just stories. They reveal emotional patterns about what we experience in real life. And today we're going to talk about the pattern that keeps repeating in romantic relationships. Everyone has a type, but not in the way you think. It has nothing to do with what is visible, but everything to do with what is invisible. The emotional and psychological underlayers. Wound calls to wound. Healing calls to healing. I'm going to use the Winx Club Season 2 pairings as case studies. If you haven't watched the show, that's fine. The information is going to be relevant regardless. But if you have, do tell me in the comments which couple reflects the dynamics, the patterns that you yourself experience in your own romantic relationships. And by the end of the video, do tell me if I read you correctly. You will also find an oracle card message that has to do with the topic of this video. Feel free to check it out as well. I am running free live workshop on Thursday the 23rd. It's going to be an applied shadow work workshop where I bring in an archetype. We're just gonna study it live and see how it relates to us, what behaviors were created and why. So if you're interested in that, it's going to be Thursday the 23rd. Do think to add it to your calendar by checking the link in the description. I'm going to start with Helia and Flora. First of all, because they're the quickest to talk about, but also because they're the younger, the newer relationship, because this pairing is introduced in season 2 of Winx Club. Now, enough about what is grounded in the show, because I know some of you might not actually have watched Winx Club and are maybe doing your laundry right now or your homework as you're listening to this video. So what is important to note about Helia and Flora is that those two characters are very similar, and they are the characters that I would call healed, that require very minimum healing. So they are actually very well matched in the sense that they are well-rounded people, not just in terms of like personality, because they match quite well. We've got two introverts that are very sensitive and that have an eye for beauty and nature. I mean, that is like a match made in heaven, right? Very similar values as well. But no, what's great about them is that they are on the same level in terms of emotional maturity and also in terms of relationship baggage. Flora, as far as we know, comes from normal family without any sort of issue. She doesn't appear to have any wound related to her childhood. And the one thing that is prevalent, Flora, is that she is not the most self-assured person. But I would say that this has more to do with her like personality. She's someone who has higher levels of neuroticism and high levels of agreeableness. So I think this kind of makes sense. Check out my video on the big five if you don't get what I mean. But what I'm saying is the parts where she is, let's say, insecure or unsure have more to do with her personality than they do about past wounds that she may have from other relationships that don't have to be romantic, by the way. So she doesn't appear to have any of those in particular. Helia, we don't really know a lot about. All that we know is that he is a pacifist and that he's very sensitive and mature. He's not a very imposing person. He doesn't like take a lot of space. Like, he is not going to grab the attention, which is great because Flora isn't either and actually wouldn't do well with someone who would take that much space or who would invade her space. So they are a really good match, very healthy match, and they are as well matched because of the similar values, the similar personalities, and also the similar levels of emotional maturity and the lack of baggage when it comes to relationships. So if you loved this pairing as a kid, for those of you who have watched Winx Club, it either says that you grew up in a similar way where your relationships in your life, your home, your friends, your family were pretty healthy relationships overall, where you knew you were loved and cared for. Doesn't mean that everything was rainbow and roses, but it does mean that they in no way contributed to a baggage that you would later carry on in like romantic relationships in like your life when you are older. Or it's because you are someone who was able to see and perceive the own dysfunction in your relationships growing up. You could see that something was wrong, and so upon seeing the example of Flora and Helia, who are very non-dramatic people, very peaceful type of relationship, very healthy relationship, really, the healthiest relationship in Winx Club as of season 2, you would know that, oh, this is what I want because this is what I don't have. Notice that when it comes to how we relate to stories or even to other people, when I say stories, I don't just mean fiction. I can also mean just other people's lives or stories for us, because it's not our own experience, right? But we still learn from it. And so you either have something similar and you're like, yeah, this is what I want because this is what I experienced as a child growing up. Or you know that something is wrong in the dynamics that were around you in your home and also in your friendships. And you're like, well, I would love something as non-problematic as this, something that is so peaceful and so, some would say boring, but it's just really healthy. Tell me, did I get you correctly, or did I completely miss the mark when it comes to why you were so attached to that pairing, if you have watched Winx Club? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. It really helps with YouTube, and also it tells me that you enjoy this type of videos so that I can do more. Of course, now that we have talked about Flora and Helia, we're going to talk about the other rather healthy relationship, romantic relationship in Winx Club, which is Tecna and Timmy. Both Tecna and Timmy, I think, are similar to Flora and Helia in the sense that I don't think that they have any baggage that comes from their family or their friendships growing up. So they don't really bring in baggage that has to do with their environment growing up. The difficulty in their relationships mostly has to do with their personalities. The reason why I think as of season 2, Tecna and Timmy are not as healthy as Helia and Flora, despite Helia and Flora knowing each other for much less time, is because you have to do with two individuals when it comes to Tecna and Timmy that are very intellectual. While they're emotionally mature, because every time someone brings up an issue when it comes to their relationship, they give very grounded advice. They are the type to overthink, overanalyze, and also really interact with life using their mind, instead of this. Now, I don't mean this just in terms of symbolism. What ends up happening with Tecna and Timmy is that they intellectualize feelings. They intellectualize relationships. Tecna more so than Timmy, actually. And because Tecna is such a big brain person, she kind of over applies logic and assumes and projects things because she's so intellectual. So they're not necessarily people who aren't well matched. They are very well matched. They have great potential to be a really good and healthy relationship. They have similar values, they have similar personalities, they're both emotionally mature, don't have baggage prior to entering the relationship. So on paper, it's all great. But what does make them stand out and be slightly less well-oiled than Helia and Flora is this over-intellectualization of things. It also makes sense because Helia and Flora are like very sensitive, emotionally in tune people. Tecna and Timmy, less so. You know, very good with computers and machines and puzzles and all of that. Less so with people. Still, very good and healthy relationship. The biggest hurdle they really had to overcome was just themselves, really. They had to get over themselves. They had to plainly communicate what they wanted and what they were feeling, which they weren't doing because they were assuming the other one already knew. So if Tecna and Timmy was your favorite pairing growing up, or if you see yourself in Tecna and Timmy. It might be because you are yourself someone who overthinks or over-intellectualizes things. So you might be someone who is much more in tune with their intellect than they are with their emotions, which I would say is like a good time to tell you that be in your feels a little bit more and try and develop your intuitive, sensitive sides more. This is a muscle. So just because there is friction and some things don't work out, or if there is conflict, doesn't mean it's bad. In this case, both of these people are very well matched, very mature. They are compatible. That is not the question. The issue that they have is about communication, and that is a skill. Being in tune with your emotions, also something that you practice, something that you learn to access. Which kind of leads me here. If you're someone who has trouble letting go, I do have a free relaxation recording that I've got up on my website. If you're interested in that, the link is in my bio or in the video description. Now we're going to go to the next pairing, which is Stella and Brandon. A little bit of context for those who are not very knowledgeable about Winx Club or who don't remember much. These two are like the very gregarious, extroverted, big flirts. Very good-natured people, very fun type of people. What's interesting about this pairing is that whereas for Helia and Flora and for Tecna and Timmy, I'd say these are like people who come from a non-wounded place. Stella and Brandon are not the same type of couple, of pairing, of relationship, because Stella has a lot of relationship baggage. We don't know how much relationship baggage Brandon has. I would go on a gander and say that he doesn't really have much of anything. If there is something there with him, I would say that it's the fact that he is of a lower station than Stella is, because he lived his whole life knowing that he was technically Sky's servant and he was supposed to protect Sky's identity. Stella is a princess, so in terms of status, there's a mismatch there. But otherwise, in terms of personality, in terms of values, they are a great match. So Brandon is pretty healthy and very emotionally mature as well. So that's not the problem. The issue is more so with the baggage that Stella has. And boy oh boy does she have baggage, because her parents divorced when she was younger. She has internalized a lot of that. She even says that the reason why she wanted to become a fairy, because that's the plot for those of you who don't know about Winx, is because she wanted to bring back together people who have drifted apart. It does show that there's some internalization of that. Also, we know that Stella's greatest fear is about being isolated, about being ignored, which explains the eye-grabbing personality, the very loud persona. Not that she's not naturally gregarious, but I do think a lot of it is also to say to the world, hey, remember, I'm here, look at me. Stella definitely has some baggage, some emotional baggage, and I would say that Stella is not the most emotionally mature person in Winx Club. She's one of the least emotionally mature in Winx Club, actually, though she is quite good at reflection when she notices things. And I would say that while she's not the most self-aware, Stella is very proactive. So when she notices something, she is going to go at it and she's going to be determined to change it. I think the reason why Stella and Brandon work really well as a couple, despite the mismatch in terms of emotional maturity and in terms of emotional baggage, is because Stella is actually actively working on herself, even she doesn't consciously know it. She kind of has this very optimistic outlook and attitude as well, which does help with a lot of things. So she wants to make things work, she is going to put in the work, even if the work is, or the problem or the issue, quote unquote, is herself. And because of that, she's able to match really well with someone who technically, in terms again of emotional maturity, amount of baggage, is technically a bit higher, well, not just a bit higher than she is in terms of like healthy dynamic. And so earlier I said that wound calls to wound, healing calls to healing. I do think that the reason why Stella and Brandon work as a relationship and have great potential to be even better is because Stella has started her healing journey. She's not done, she's not over, but she is significantly further along than some of the other Winx and characters we're going to talk about. Like, if you relate to Stella and Brandon and their relationship, you're someone who probably knows that they have some patterns that they keep repeating, or that have some flaws that contribute to a relationship. There is some level of self-awareness there, and that you likely didn't have the healthiest upbringing in terms of how it would feed into your relationships, but that you do realize it, or that at least it hasn't completely undermined your own relationships. I would say, though, that if you relate to Stella and Brandon, there might be some level of fear of commitment there, because sometimes we avoid the deep things, the important things, not because they don't matter, but because we're afraid to. This is my assumption, my opinion. Tell me if you disagree in the comments. I do think that the reason why Stella and Brandon didn't get into serious, deep territory unless their lives were literally underlined. I think the reason why they don't go deep, or they haven't really, is because mostly from Stella's point of view, but I would say also Brandon, is this like fear of commitment, because once we put a name on it, once we acknowledge it, then it makes it real, and when it's real, we can lose it. Tell me what you think. Up next, we have got Bloom and Sky. Their relationship is truly something. You might have guessed it, but I am going from the healthiest relationship to the most unhealthy relationships. And Bloom and Sky are the second to last, so that already says something. Bloom and Sky are people that I think are not a good match in terms of value and even in terms of personality. Now, they're closer to each other than not when it comes to personality, but their values don't really align. And it really shows several times because they fight a lot. Now, fighting a lot is not a problem. The thing about conflicts, about fights, is more so the resolution of the fights. And now this is where Bloom and Sky take the cake, because they are awful at communication in general. They are not emotionally mature, neither of them. They get really jealous very quickly. They assume a lot from the other without asking or without any sort of proof. They want the other to center their lives around them on some level. They are very self-involved in that regard. For those of you who have watched previous videos, you would know also that my issue with Sky is that he's incredibly entitled. His entitlement, his behavior, comes from the fact, I think, that he was raised a prince. And so he is someone that got yes man around him all the time. Kind of in a similar way to Stella. But unlike Stella, Sky does not apologize, and he can be incredibly arrogant for one, but also authoritative when there is no need to be and when he has no business to be. Because of that, because he had yes men around him, he's actually quite insecure, despite the fact that he comes from a place of privilege. And you would assume that because he materially had everything he needed and wanted in life, then he should be set up for life, right? Well, no, wrong. When we met his parents, you can tell they're not the incredibly loving, communicative, understanding parents. So I do think that my theory of Sky is actually quite insecure is on point. Now, on Bloom's side of things, she makes less sense because she does have brilliant parents. Now, she wasn't very popular before coming to Healthiest, so there probably was some level of problems with acceptance, which was further aggravated when she got into Healthiest and she was the new girl and she didn't know how to use magic and all of that. So this could be a thing. Regardless, they really have poor mismatch in terms of values, and they don't really understand the other's emotional needs well at all. And I'm saying it on like both sides, even though I do have somewhat of a vendetta against Sky because he does infuriate me. I will be fair and say that both of them are pretty shitty, equally so, at understanding each other's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, etc., or even understanding their motives and their goals in life. Like, they're not aligned at all. If we bring it back to the wound calls to wound and the healing calls to healing, now this is a pretty obvious case where you have two wounded individuals that have, in a way, the same wound, just not expressed in the same way. Bloom is about being accepted, about being important. It's the same thing with Sky. He has some self-esteem, insecurity going on. And what happens when you have two individuals in a relationship that seek validation from the other and don't know how to express that they need the validation from each other to function, you end up having a pretty codependent relationship, because that is pretty much what it is. If as a child you really looked up to, or now as an adult you see yourself in this relationship, I would say that you likely are someone who either had a home life or a wider social life where insecurities were planted for sure. Unfortunately, those insecurities still have a hold of you now in your adult life. I'm saying adult because I assume that most of you watching me are adults. So you're likely seeking validation from your partner, which is something that is unfortunate because the only person's validation you need is actually yourself. The thing that we don't really understand when we are insecure as children, people's regard can be important, but it is only as important as you let it be important. Pretty sure one Barbie movie says something along the lines like, it's only as important as you let it have importance on you, but that is correct. When validation is what you need, validation is what you can give to yourself. So actually, if that is you, not only do I want to say, don't look for anyone's permission or validation. You're your own person. You can give it to yourself. And you need to feel your own self, fill your own cup, your own self-love, your own esteem first, before darting out into the world and into romantic relationships or relationships of any kind, really. Because this gives a terrible recipe for either having a codependent relationship at the best, or it can lead into having more dangerous relationships where you might be exposed to people who will very much take advantage of you and will keep your esteem very low so that they can keep being your life. And I mean, this is like where the narcissists come in. Fix your own love for yourself first before thinking of finding love outside. You know, like, the love is already here. It's when you want to share it that you actually, you know, you're not going out to find it, you have it in yourself. And if you're someone who wants help doing that, because the tricky thing with having low self-esteem or any other limiting beliefs, truly, and limiting beliefs are like beliefs about ourselves that were formed when we were younger, that were maybe helpful, maybe not, but that somehow stuck around because there was some need for them, usually because it was important for our own protection and survival, that we still carry in adulthood when it doesn't need to be there anymore. To be able to change it, you need to understand it. But if the root cause is deep within your subconscious and very early in your childhood, it gets much trickier and it needs a lot more time. So I do recommend doing hypnotherapy sessions, preferably with me while you're watching this video, because I'm a hypnotherapist. I do have the link to my website in the description. And the reason I say this, and I don't say regular talk therapy, I might actually say something about, tell me if you want my opinion on like regular therapy, BetterHelp. I did use it before I became a hypnotherapist, so I do have my thoughts and opinions on it. But my personal gripe with talk therapy is that you can only say what you know. And most of the time, the root cause for your behaviors is not something that you know, because it's something that like first started when you were 3. And as much as you would want to like know about it, you know, unless you have like perfect memory and you remember everything from the moment you were born, that's going to be really tricky. And then going into changing that, talk therapy doesn't really help, whereas hypnotherapy or doing lithotherapy or like deeper shadow work does. So just my thoughts and opinions. Do tell me if I got you right, if you are someone who indeed see yourself in Bloom and Sky's relationship. Now lastly, Musa and Riven, by far our most destructive couple. The thing with Musa and Riven is that they are actually very compatible, which is actually the problem. In terms of personality, they're well matched. In terms of values, they're well matched. And in terms of emotional maturity and baggage, they're also quite well matched, and therein lies the problem, because it is obvious that they struggle with expressing emotions, understanding their feelings, and being open, vulnerable, and honest with their feelings. They're not the most communicative people, those two. So that's the first big hurdle. Emotional maturity is not really there on neither end. Then the other problem, which is the baggage, emotional baggage that they had prior to entering this relationship. And both of them have quite a lot of emotional baggage. They are people who have been wounded a lot in the past, people who have felt rejection, abandonment on a deeper level and on repeated occasions than anyone else in the cast of Winx Club. They have a lot of healing to do on their own, and the fact that they are together makes it worse, because neither of them has the tools to be able to be in a relationship, even with someone who would be arguably much healthier, like, let's say, a Brandon or a Timmy and a Helia. Like, none of them could actually be in a relationship with someone who is healed. Being in a relationship with someone else who is just as deeply wounded and has that much work to do is awful, because it just creates a dynamic where they just are hot and cold all the time, they fight all the time, but the resolution is shit. It's just very volatile, very emotionally reactive, and that's not great, because it's keeping them stuck, because you don't have anyone to really pull the other up. They're both dragging each other down. That's basically what's happening. Now, I will say that Riven has done some healing. He is significantly better in season 2 than he was in season 1, and he does continue to evolve. The thing is, because of how much baggage he has, he can't go from a Riven to a Helia in a matter of a season. That is not feasible unless you do some really transformative, intensive work, which none of them do. I mean, it's like possible, but like this would take a lot of work and determination and help. So it's not surprising that he still relapses sometimes. Now, Musa is not at all aware of just how badly she reacts to things and how emotionally reactive she is. She knows on some level, but she doesn't just understand the depth of it. And there are a lot of times where she just jumps at Riven for no reason at all, and you're like, girl, he didn't do anything. And this does not help Riven, who we know has some kind of wound around women, and past commenters have thankfully pointed out that there was some article or something in a comic that said that apparently Riven's mom had abandoned him, and it's like, well, yeah, clearly he had some issues around women. He was quite misogynistic in season 1, and he has gotten a lot better, but still, even like the way he got better was pretty much like an intensive shadow work session, because he was basically tortured, not basically, he was, by Darcy in season 1 in the cells. Like, psychologically, he had to meet his own shadow. He had to meet the monster within, quote unquote. I think this is like a pretty good explanation of like the leaps and bounds that Riven has made. But on the other hand, Musa really hasn't made any progress. And she has both abandonment wounds that have to do with her mom, who passed away, and also passed away in a way that was really difficult, like emotionally difficult. And she now has like emotional wounds that are tied to her father. So when you have daddy issues and you have mommy issues, and you put those two together, that's like a recipe for disaster. This is like a cake powder exploding kind of scenario. If you are someone who sees yourself in this relationship dynamic, you need to focus on yourself first, and you need to focus on your own healing first before you can enter in a relationship. In the same way that Bloom and Sky need to do their own work and their own healing before they're able to be together, because they become codependent, for Musa and Riven, they become borderline abusive with each other. Not physically so, but emotionally so, yes. Verbally so, yes. So if you see yourself in there, or if you really identified with this pairing, you either are all living this on some extent, where you keep repeating this pattern of being really aggressive, very emotionally reactive, and you might know that you are, but you just can't seem to change, and it's just pissing you off more. Or this is the pattern that you saw growing up, either in your family, your immediate circles, or you actually like were exposed to a lot of emotionally, verbally, or even physically abusive individuals and relationships. It is either going to make you absorb some of the same tendencies, or it's going to have the opposite effect, which is that you're going to be more likely to attract people who have those traits, those issues in your life, in your relationship, and you would then be the victim of those same patterns that you saw portrayed as a child. My advice here, as much as you can, get out of those relationships. And I know it's not easy, and I'm just saying it like this, but really, for your own sake, banish those relationships and those people from your life. Even if you manage to get out of those people that are presently in your life, it's not gonna help you not attract them anymore. So the most important thing you need to do is to do some healing, to do some inner work, so that you banish the insecurities, the fears, the wounds out of yourself, so that no one else can exploit them and therefore exploit you. I'm of course available to do that type of work. Info on my website. I'm a hypnotherapist, by the way. If you had skipped the Bloom section, you wouldn't know. This is exactly the type of things that I do. Help you be a better version of you, and the version of you that you deserve to be too. On this note, we are actually done with the romantic pairings analysis. So do tell me if anything ran true, if it resonated with you. If you would like me to do similar types of analysis, I was thinking of analyzing the Stardew Valley Bachelors. I mean, I was thinking of doing it eventually, but tell me if I have any Stardew Valley enjoyers here. I think that's likely. I'll say the crossover between between Winx Club and Stardew Valley must be somewhat high. By the way, if you're interested in what my own experience was like with these pairings growing up, my favorites were Flora and Musa. Make of that what you will. And now we're going to the card pull. So this is the card that I pulled a couple of hours ago, and it came out quick. So we've got here le bison, the bison. I did say that last week's was really on point. I'm going to keep saying this week is still very on point with the topic at hand, which was relationships and what it says about ourselves, really. This is what the guidebook says. It's in French, as I am French myself. The bison. Keywords: tranquil force, values, calm. You have a great force within. Tranquil and solid force. You have worked. You have invested so that the foundation of your life is good and solid. Congratulate yourself to have made it there. Look at the majesty that is the bison. He does not judge, but he does impose respect. This card of the bison invites you to consolidate your foundations, to position yourself, to reject and get away, to create distance with stressful situations, conflicts, to enter profound peace with yourself. Do not be afraid to say no. It is important to choose yourself and to incarnate your profound values. Calm and serenity are beneficial to you right now. It's really on point, isn't it? On that note, bye guys, I appreciate you making it all the way here.